Let's say there's an old wooden fence just sitting in your backyard. It's crooked, leaning slightly, splintered where years of weather have just worn it down. Well, you've tried to fix it more than once. You've hammered nail after nail after nail, propped it up with boards, even leaned into it with your shoulder like a friend steadying another. But no matter what you do, the fence just leans again. Well, one day, tired of its stubbornness, you walk outside and just give it a good solid kick. Not a gentle nudge, a real frustrated stomp. And it doesn't move. It just groans back at you like it's been through much worse, and it'll still be there long after your anger fades. Well, you walk away, then come back a few days later and do the same thing all over again. Maybe you're not even sure why. Maybe it's not about the fence anymore. Maybe it's about what it reminds you of. Something unresolved. Something you wish had gone differently. We all have something like that, don't we? A person who won't apologize. A wound that still stings, even though the cause is long, long gone. A story that we keep just retelling in our heads over and over, hoping for a different ending somehow. Or a version of ourselves we keep trying to revive, one who didn't fail, didn't lose, or just didn't let go. The trouble isn't just that things exist, it's that we return to them, as if effort alone can undo what's already settled. We yell at fences, we bargain with storms, we try to bring back what time has quietly laid to rest. But some things don't change. Not because they're cruel, but because they're finished. They've done their part. And here's the part we often miss. Not everything that bothers us needs to be battled. Some things, like that fence, aren't asking for a fight. They're asking for, I guess you could say, a type of blessing, a soft goodbye, a nod of respect for the season they belong to. Because maybe the fence leans because it has a story. And maybe it's time we stop trying to make it new and start asking what could grow in the space around it. What's something in your life that might be a fence you keep kicking? It's funny how small little moments can unravel our sense of control. A driver cuts us off in traffic, and suddenly our mood just shifts like the gears of a clock. A stranger's thoughtless comment loops in our mind for days. Or the weather, it turns gray, or maybe just plans fall apart. Or maybe even someone that we love deeply just grows distant. And without warning, we find ourselves carrying an invisible weight that we never agreed to pick up. There's a phrase that I return to, and it's a simple little saying that's not mine to carry. Not because I don't care, but honestly because I do. In fact, too much. That phrase isn't meant to be cold or dismissive. It's not a way of turning away from people. It's a gentle recognition that we aren't built to shoulder everything. Some burdens belong to others. Some outcomes aren't ours to manage. Some stories don't require our editing, only our witnessing. I used to think being strong meant holding it all together, keeping everything patched, repaired, running. But what I've learned is sometimes, and I learned it the hard way, to be honest, is that true strength often looks like letting something be. Just letting it stay unresolved. Letting someone else wrestle with what they brought into the room. Letting go of the need to fix what doesn't want to be fixed. This isn't surrender. It's stewardship. It's saying, here's where my responsibility ends and my presence begins. And that shift, it creates space for healing, for peace, for meaningful work, and for laughter, for love that's rooted in reality, not rescue. Leaving something be doesn't mean that you didn't care. It means you cared enough to stop doing harm in your attempt to help. And it's often the beginning of wisdom. Where are you planting your energy right now? Is the soil even good? Walter lived in a small village nestled between two slow-moving rivers. The kind of town where people wave to each other. These streets were just filled with the smell of fresh bread drifting from the kitchen windows. Walter owned a small little shop, one with foggy glass windows and an old brass bell above the door. He repaired timepieces, watches, clocks, not because it made him rich, but because he just loved what it meant to tend to something as delicate and steady as time. The locals all knew him for his love of time and lovingly called him the second-hand guardian. People would bring him wristwatches that had been through wars, pocket watches handed down from grandfathers, old clocks that had ticked in the background through generations, many childhoods. And Walter, with his quiet hands and steady gaze, treated each one like it mattered. One crisp autumn morning, a stranger walked in, carrying an old grandfather clock behind him. It stood taller than Walter. Its wood was worn smooth from generation after generation of touching it. Its pendulum was still. Finally, the stranger said, "It belonged to my grandfather," almost apologetically. And finally said, "It hasn't worked in years, but I'd give anything to just hear it tick again." Well, Walter accepted the challenge. He spent hours opening the back, dusting cobwebs, cleaning gears. He replaced the old parts with new ones that he machined himself. He rebalanced the pendulum and oiled every spring. But no matter what he did, the clock remained still. Well, days started to stretch into weeks. He skipped lunches, dinners. He stayed up late into the night. His other repairs started piling up, and because of that, customers just stopped coming. His hands eventually started to grow stiff, and his joy even dimmed. And one evening, under the flickering light of his desk lamp, he slumped in defeat beside the stubborn clock and whispered, "Why won't you come back to life?" Well, no answer came, of course, only silence. But in that silence, something softened in him. The thought came, not in words, but in a kind of knowing. And it was, some things are not meant to be fixed. They're meant to be remembered. He stood and he polished the clock one last time. He wrapped it up carefully in cloth and returned it to the stranger. He told him it won't tick again, but it still tells a story that's meaningful. The man didn't protest. In fact, his eyes filled with tears and said, I think that's all I really needed to hear. Walter returned to his shop. He cleared the clutter, opened the windows up again, took on the smaller repairs that he loved so much, the kind that he could hold in one hand. And he started laughing more, resting more, speaking kindly to himself. And once in a while, when he passed the shelf where he kept the old broken timepieces that he just couldn't fix, he'd smile. Not with regret, but with peace. For what they once meant to people. And for how far he had come since realizing he can't fix everything. What's one clock in your life that you've been trying to fix, when maybe it's meant to simply be remembered? There's a kind of fatigue that doesn't come from overwork. It comes from overholding. I've known it well. There were chapters in my life where I kept pouring energy into things that no longer gave anything back. And I don't mean that bitterly. At the time, I thought it was loyalty, dedication. Ultimately, I realized that this was merely a version of myself that I kept chasing long after he stopped fitting into who I was becoming. A dream that had quietly died, but I still returned to it out of habit. I can remember the quiet ache that would settle into my chest like something was missing, even though I was doing everything right. And that's the thing about broken clocks. They still look like they belong on the wall, still look like they should work. And sometimes that illusion is enough to keep us stuck. But eventually, the silence becomes undeniable. The stillness isn't temporary. When the effort becomes grief in motion. Well, one day, after too many nights wrestling with the things that I couldn't fix, I sat in my office right here and whispered, "I see you." Not to someone else, but to me, to the younger version of myself who tried so hard, who meant well, who didn't know when it was time to stop. And that moment didn't heal everything, but it began a shift. I stopped kneeling at the grave of what might have been. I started noticing what still lived around me. A friend who stayed, a laugh that just surprised me out of nowhere, a story still waiting to be written. And sometimes the bravest thing we do is just stop. Have you ever found yourself tending to something long after it stopped serving you? There's a subtle kind of freedom that comes from letting go. Not the grand cinematic kind where you toss your suitcase into the wind at a railroad station and just walk away, but the soft kind. The kind that settles in your shoulders when you finally exhale and say, "This isn't mine anymore." We live in a world that praises hustle, persistence, and fixing everything that's broken. And yes, there's value in that. Don't get me wrong. But there's also wisdom in asking, is this still mine to carry? Some battles we fight just out of habit. Some roles we keep because we don't know who we are without them. Some wounds we tend to, not because they're still bleeding, but because they give us a reason to feel needed. But here's the truth. Not all growth is necessarily forward. Some growth is inward, downward, rooted. And it begins when we reclaim the parts of us we gave away trying to prove our worth. When you stop fighting the unfixable, you regain your time, your clarity, your strength. You remember what it's like to move with intention and not desperation. You begin to invest in the living parts of your story, the ones still asking for your care. This is resilience through acceptance. It's the steady hand that asks you to pause, to listen, and to ask, is this still true about me? Is this still where I want to plant my heart? Is this helping me love others more fully, or just keeping me busy? You don't have to answer all at once. You just have to begin to start noticing, start releasing, and start watering the things that can bloom in your life. So what might grow in your life if you stop watering what no longer blooms? There's a hush that comes after a storm, the kind that humbles you. The air just smells different, doesn't it? The ground is damp. The leaves, they shimmer like they've been freshly baptized. The chaos is past, and the earth just seems to breathe. And you can too. Letting go often feels like this. Not loud, not final, just still. Like your soul is catching up to your body. Like the world is making space for you again. And maybe you've been walking through your own storm. One without thunder, but heavy with emotion. Maybe you've been holding on to something, to things that don't love you back. Working yourself ragged to fix what keeps slipping through your fingers. Trying to be strong when really you're just tired. And if that's you, let this be your pause. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're human. And humans have limits. Beautiful God-given limits that protect us from just turning into machines. There's no shame in admitting that this is too much. There's courage in saying, I just need to set this down. There's a quiet kind of power in choosing to just stop, even when the world says to keep going. So today, what if you laughed again? Even if your laugh feels rusty. What if you called someone, took a walk, made something, or simply sat in a room and watched the way the sunlight moves across the floor? What if that's where healing begins? Not in doing more, but in doing less, but with more presence. You don't need to earn your peace. You just need to make room for it. And sometimes peace looks like this, like resting in the knowledge that what's next doesn't have to look like what's been. What's one small thing that you can release today? And what might that free you to do instead? Walter's story isn't about fixing our understanding of what it means to care. It's easy to believe that love looks like effort, like pouring ourselves out until the thing or the person just works again. We think that if we just keep going, keep showing up, keep adjusting, we can bring something back. But care isn't always about revival. Sometimes it's about reverence, about honoring what once was without forcing it into what it's not anymore. The clock held value, not because it worked, but because it belonged. It held a memory, identity. But when Walter stopped trying to make it tick, he made room to listen, to return, to heal. There are clocks in all of our lives, roles, relationships, ambitions that once made us feel like we belonged, and now maybe they don't. But that doesn't mean they didn't matter. Your story is allowed to evolve. You're allowed to grow past what once defined you. You're allowed to say, this mattered, but it no longer moves me. And that's not disloyalty, that's maturity. And when you're becoming, that person might just surprise you. What part of your story deserves to be remembered, but no longer relived? You're not too far gone. You're not running out of time. You haven't missed your moment or lost your worth in the waiting. You're here. And that's no small thing. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is stop and listen to the stillness inside of us. To set down what we've been carrying, not with bitterness, but with blessing. To honor it for what it was and release it for what it no longer needs to be. So let this be your gentle turn. Not a revolution, not a performance, just one hand loosening, one breath deepening, one small act of grace toward yourself. You can stop kicking the fence. It's okay if it lands. You can stop trying to fix the clock. It's okay if it's silent. These things are part of the landscape now, not problems to solve, but memories to hold on to with kindness. There's space in your life for something new, not louder, not shinier, just real. A garden still waiting to bloom, a conversation waiting to begin, a version of you who's patient, wiser, and more present, who has been waiting for permission to come forward. And here it is. You're allowed to begin again, to release, to rest, and stop performing and start becoming. Thank you for spending time with me today. Thank you for caring enough to wrestle and rest with me in return. And maybe, while it may not always be who we are, it can be about who we want to be. Thank you for watching.